Hello, and welcome to Meatheads with Microphones with your resident jocks turned philosophers. My name is Sam Zimmer.
And I'm Katie Ryan. Today we'll be discussing progress. More specifically, what is progress? Is it happening? Is it good?
We'll be bringing in the works of Mary Wollstonecraft, G.W.F. Hegel, Karl Marx, and Hannah Arendt in order to determine answers to these questions.
Just 4 authors, because, these questions are nice and simple.
So simple. Personally, I tend to vibe more with Hannah Arendt's sort of anti-progress sentiment. Like her, I don't believe that our current measures of progress, like technological progress and wealth, are really what we should be aiming for.
I, on the other hand, believe in progress, especially in healthcare and women's rights, as per Wollstonecraft and Hegel.
Time for a friendly little discussion of such topics as those addressed by the great Ali G.
Technology, what is that all about? Is it good or is it whack?
So we're going to start into what is progress, and we actually have 2 definitions. So the first one is the kind of current commonly accepted definition, and that's progress is the measurable improvement of human lives, most often by using technology. This improvement is measured by data collection on things like human life expectancy, gross domestic product, and global energy production.
However, there's another possible definition in that progress could also be considered to be the improvement of human lives, but with an emphasis on how people live and their quality of life rather than for how long or how economically successful they are. This definition of progress may not be measurable except for the psychological measures of things like anxiety, happiness, and general satisfaction with their day-to-day lives.
So, Katie, you kind of also subscribe to like a synthesis between these 2 definitions, right? Like, it's sort of like things are getting better, but quality of life maybe isn't. Like, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, in general, I think that for the social systems at large, progress is happening and it seems to be going in a pretty decent way in that we have improved healthcare, more people are living above the poverty line, and there's more access to education at the K through 12 levels, at least in the US. However, in like an individual day-to-day life, the idea of progress in society at large may not be as beneficial because people seem to be less and less satisfied with their day-to-day lives and how they're progressing in their free time because they have less and less free time and less money and time to spend with their family, friends, and other people that they care about because they're devoting so much time to their work, which, as seen like throughout history, the idea has always been that as we continue to progress, that we'll work less and spend more time doing our leisure activities, and that's not how society has progressed for individuals.
Gotcha. So I guess we kind of have to decide whether or not progress is improving human quality of life or if it's just like getting better at things that we've been kind of working on as humans collectively for a very long time. So now we want to move on to whether or not progress is happening.
I think that according to the commonly accepted definition, which we talked about earlier, progress is absolutely happening. The ideas that humanity can constantly improve are backed up by Hegel and Marx, but in their own special and pretty different ways. Even though Hegel and Marx are absolutely positive that history is progressing in stages, they differ in that Marx thinks that these stages are economic and eventually human society will end in communism. Whereas with Hegel, he thinks that these different stages are times of conflict and resolution in which will move history forward towards a similar state of communism, though one's own choices will reflect what the state wants you to do and that the state isn't specifically telling you what to do.
Yeah, Hegel's got a kind of a weird end of history, but they are pretty similar. So yeah, like Marx's theory is that the working class, well, at the time that he wrote his theory, was that the working class would rise up soon after mass alienation, but obviously that hasn't come true, and I think that things have generally gotten a lot worse for the worker. So he might actually look at today and say that, we're kind of regressing away from communism, Or, he could also say that we're just getting closer and closer to the inevitable, which, again, he would say is communism. As he does say that things need to get really bad before they get better.
Yeah, I mean, the things getting worse for the worker is what I was referring to earlier when I was talking about quality of life for individual people, in that I think that has actually regressed and gotten worse as the future kind of progresses and we keep moving through time. However, I don't think that Marx's solution to collectivize all of society, aka communism, is a solution to making people's quality of life better, since they still wouldn't be able to find satisfaction in their own successes and their own progress through their career if they weren't rewarded for it, nor would they have the leisure time to spend with their loved ones, which is kind of what we've been working towards in history.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting that Marx is very bent on kind of collectivizing all of humanity for progress, and you might lose some of that individuality if we, move to communism or something like that. Hegel's ideas about human history, I think, sort of seem to ignore the idea that humans could be wiped out, or maybe he wouldn't even care about this. We have this global warming that's going on right now, and I wonder if he would think that this is just a period of bad that would lead to a period of good. But what if we can't fix global warming and we just get wiped out?
I mean, I think that Hegel just doesn't care to put any effort or thought towards the hypothetical situations if humans were to be wiped out, because if our society isn't there anymore, we've clearly reached the end of history, and we can no longer philosophize about what will happen because it's already happened and we've already been wiped out. However, considering the global warming example, I wonder if Hegel would think that the large corporations are currently kind of ruling the earth because of their pollution levels and control over the economic market, as well as the convenience in the consumers. I literally have not met a person in college that doesn't use Amazon. And so I'm kind of curious as to whether Hegel would believe that the corporations need to be toppled in order to save the planet and hopefully reverse some of the damage done by global warming so far.
Yeah, I think that Hegel might actually think that someone like Jeff Bezos might be the person to solve the climate crisis as a, quote-unquote great man. He might think that, the spirit might act through Jeff Bezos and he would kind of right all of his wrongs. But I think that Hannah Arendt would more say that Amazon at this point and other companies like it are untoppable because they have a lot of power. So she thinks of power as a bunch of individuals that come together and act together and work through speech and action. And Amazon has a lot of power and strength, but usually violence is able to kind of upset the order of power. But you can't really use violence against Amazon, or at least no one has really tried that yet. So, yeah, these corporations may be untoppable.
Yeah, I agree in that even though Arendt seems to think that violence is the only way to get rid of or disperse power because it's divisive, it doesn't seem like that violence is the answer to, I guess, simplifying or destroying Amazon, because it's already so spread out and so all-encompassing around the world. So I feel like that the inability to kind of topple Amazon and help work towards a better and cleaner earth, still going back to that global warming example with Hegel, it seems that we've tried almost everything outside of violence, but it doesn't seem like violence would work either, because we've tried peace talks and climate agreements like the Paris Agreement, and nothing has really worked, which Hegel agrees in that he says, and this is a direct quote, "Amid the pressure of great events, which could be climate change, a general principle, aka the Paris Agreement and other agreements such that, gives no help. It is useless to revert to similar circumstances in the past because the situation that we're working with currently is so different that it needs a different solution and answer, and we just don't have a solution for it yet."
Yeah, modern corporations are so large that we don't even really know where we would direct the violence, I think. And this kind of speaks to Marx's idea that, alienation goes very deep, but somehow in this reality that we live in, alienation has gone so far that it's almost like destroyed any possibility of communism, and it's just so all-encompassing. So basically, there's no real way to negotiate with corporations or have any kind of say over our political life, like Hannah Arendt kind of wants us to. And so, according to her, progress may not be happening. Her definition of progress is actually fairly close to the common definition, as she says it gives humans the capacity to do more things, like produce more energy, etc. But she doesn't necessarily think that this should be the goal. Instead, she wants us to exercise our ability for political thought. And so the more humanity seems to be progressing, the less we are able to do that.
Yeah, I feel like Arendt's ideas of progress, in terms of people being able to do more activities, ties in pretty closely with Wollstonecraft's ideas about women and their place in society. Because during Wollstonecraft's time, women weren't able to do nearly as much as men in regards to education, careers, sports, and more. And I think this was really clearly evidenced when we discussed Wollstonecraft's background and her education as compared to her brother's education, because for her time, Wollstonecraft's education for a girl was pretty decent, but her brother received a far better education than she did, simply because he was the boy child, even though she was more intelligent and could function at a higher level than her brother could, and it would have therefore made more sense for her to receive the higher quality education. And Wollstonecraft acknowledges that this is a social issue in that, and this is a direct quote from her, "Women are told from their infancy and taught by their mother's example that a little knowledge of a human weakness, properly called cunning, softness of temperament, outward obedience, and scrupulous attention to a puerile kind of propriety will obtain for them the protection of man, and if they are also beautiful, that's all they need for at least 20 years. And so clearly, in this quote, the priority for women in her time was placed on looks and people-pleasing behavior, not their own success. And I do think that there's been a lot of progress made in this regard in terms of women's rights, because women are now able to obtain an equal education and they have a lot more job opportunities now. Though there's still a lot of progress to be made in terms of the parental and maternity leave situations at different companies across the country, as well as just society not putting as much of an emphasis on women's looks for their value.
So now, moving from Wollstonecraft, we're really starting to get into whether or not progress is good.
I think that the answer to this question kind of depends on which definition of progress we're using. For the first definition, focused on greater society, I don't think that the current way society is progressing is good. Though there have been a lot of improvements, like improved healthcare, better communication methods, and decreased travel time, there have also been a lot of drawbacks. Nuclear weapons and their former use, puts our lives at risk every day, and countries are currently escalating their nuclear programs. In addition to that, school shootings, at least in the US, have become more and more common as our laws make it easier to obtain guns.
Agreed. And even though people often state that this is like sort of the most peaceful time on Earth, in terms of like the number of conflicts and stuff, they're kind of measuring based off of markers that only came into existence around the same time that colonialism really took off, which I think was a very violent time. And so throughout many other parts of human history, peace and political power have essentially been like the norm and ruled. Peace may not even be a good thing necessarily, at least according to Arendt or someone like that, because it means we can't solve collective problems even by the most desperate means, which would be, violence.
Yeah, and not only is progress failing us collectively on a global scale, but also for individual people, I think progress, as we currently define it, is bad. It has lowered our quality of life and caused us to have less leisure time, whereas throughout history, it seems as though we've been working towards automating things so that we could be spending more time doing what we want to do with people that we enjoy spending time with, not working more and earning less and having less free time.
Agreed. Progress is overrated. Maybe humans should be shifting towards stronger emphasis on quality of life measures like happiness and stuff like that over measures of economic or violent power. I'm not sure just changing the benchmarks would lead to immediate improvements, but it's worth a shot.
This has been Meatheads with Microphones, chatting about progress. Thank you, Jason Z. Resnikoff, for listening.